So I'd like you to meet today's guests. These guys are friends of mine, but they're more like brothers, in my opinion. And I'm sure they feel the same way, don't you?
For sure. Absolutely.
This is Brian. Brian was a New York City cop during 9/11. He was working at the Floyd Bennett Field training,
Correct.
training recruits. I responded as a first responder working in the homicide squad. Now, my friend Charlie here, I wanted to bring on because we always talk about the guys that were there and the females that were there and what happened at the locations that got attacked. But I wanted to bring Charlie on because you were a sergeant or a lieutenant at the time?
Sergeant over the fugitive unit.
In the Lee County Sheriff's
Office.
Which is down here in Florida. So I wanted to get Charlie's perspective on how outside agencies dealt with what happened that day, because, you know, I've told my story a million times on radio shows and interviews I've done. So I'm going to stay away from a lot of what happened to me. I'm just going to go over it briefly, and then I want to turn it over to Brian and then Charlie, and then just discuss what it was like. And the reason I wanted to do this show is because I'm kind of fed up with the way people are acting about this country today. And, you know, we say about 9/11, never forget. Well, guess what? People forgot. You know, I have a tattoo right here. It says never forget. But guess what? It's been forgotten. So that being said, I don't want to get too crazy into the politics of it all, but my part of that day was like any other day. I woke up, I had done a turnaround tour that a lot of people don't know what that is. It's you work till 1 in the morning, then you sleep over, and then you do an 8 to 4 the following day. So I got up because I was a union delegate to go get bagels for the guys. And on my way back, the news was on about the first plane hitting. So we were told to go down there, and I was driving, and I was on the FDR drive, and I was with two of my partners, and we saw the second plane coming in just as we got underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. Heard the explosion, knew we were in a lot of trouble. Went down there, parked the car. Little did I know what was going to happen not too soon after. But the first thing I can recall that still haunts me to this day, and I have nightmares about, is watching civilians falling from the tower where they were just dropping because they'd rather not burn to death, they'd rather fall to their death. And just seeing that and hearing the impact and watching it, it's something I could never get out of my head. I made it out of there by the skin of my teeth that day. Still suffering from injuries like all of us are and health issues with the lung stuff and sinuses, and everybody's getting cancer left and right. So that was my little bit of what happened to me that day, and then, it was a long few months after that. But talking to Brian about that day, he was actually seeing it happen from Floyd Bennett Field.
Correct.
And now, if people aren't familiar with Brooklyn and Manhattan, you get a pretty good view of Manhattan from Floyd Bennett Field, correct?
I had a perfect view of the Trade Center from Floyd Bennett Field. You could see the towers. The definition of it. I mean, it was almost like you were on top of it. It was like a picture from there.
And I can see it, knowing that place because I've been there a million times for the training. And what was going through your mind? I mean, did you think it was an attack, or what was your...
No. What had happened, I was newly transferred to a training unit to teach recruits the emergency vehicle training. I'd just come off patrol. It was my 5th day off patrol. I was actually being trained to be an instructor myself.
Okay.
So I'm going around, this cone course in the back seat. I'm getting flopped around and, 15, 20 times around, started getting a little car sick because I'm sitting in the back. So I said to the other police officer that was teaching me how to become an instructor for this course, I think I'm going to stand this one out. Now, at this point, I had known that in the recruit class, there was a police officer who had rolled over from Ohio to go through the New York City Police Academy. So just drop me off by him, talk to him. as I got out, he said to me, "Oh," he goes, "You must be the new instructor that everybody's hearing about." I said, "Yeah, this is, we got a small conversation about how much time I had on, where I worked, and I explained to him. I said, this is going to be home." I go, "I'm a motorhead, so to say. I love anything on wheels, motorcycles, boats, everything, and you have everything there, including aviation." And just as I turned, it just happened to be by chance. I said, "And I can definitely get used to looking at this till the day I retire." And I'm staring at the Trade Center, and I'm one of the very, very few people who actually seen the first plane hit. When that plane hit, my mind said, that was a Cessna. I couldn't
Right.
accept the fact that
It's funny you say that.
commercial airline.
That was the first thing that we said to ourselves is, why would it be a plane out of Teterboro?
Right.
Privately owned jet or something.
Right. Even though I had seen it with my own two eyes and I kept playing it over and over, just in shock. As this was going on, the recruits are going around being tested. All the training police cars that we had, we start lining up and we're looking when the second plane hits. Now, just as that second plane was hitting, aviation had taken off from Floyd Bennett Field and they were flying around the Trade Center from where we were looking, the south end from Brooklyn, looking into Lower Manhattan. As that helicopter went around, when that second plane hit, my heart just sunk. Number one, it was absolutely known at that point that our country was under attack on the civilian soil. Number two, I thought that friends of mine who were flying that helicopter were done. And the countless lives I knew that we were going to lose that day. And long before, I didn't even realize that the tower was going to come down.
Right. I think about it now. It was a body underneath a bunch of rubble, and apparently the guy had the same exact shoes on that I wore. So one of the guys that worked with the the detective bureau said I was dead. Says, "I just saw Stevie's dead," and they actually got in touch with the borough and said Steve's dead. So up until I was able to get in touch with anybody, because it was pandemonium down there, they had me and the two guys I was with marked down as dead or missing in action. So I'm like, well, how do you just make an assumption by shoes? Because they were Burgundy, Johnson, and Murphy shoes. I always wore my green suit. It was just dark green suit, and that was the suit I had on that day. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I call up, and the guy's on the phone. He's like, "Oh my God, you're alive." I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "Because we got you down as dead." I said, "No, I'm alive, and so's the other two guys I'm with." So it's really weird about how things unfolded that day. So after that second plane hit, did you guys get mobilized from there, or did you get?
We did. At the time, Chief Bertel was working down. He was the chief of special operations, which was Floyd Bennett Field. He came out and says, "All right, boys, get back in there. We have to bag up." So we ran, like polo shirts and stuff for our training. So when they say bag up, means get your uniform on, vest, belts, and we started transporting vehicles down to Lower Manhattan. We were stopped, prior to the first tower collapse, and we were still in Brooklyn. At that point, listening to the radio and just the insanity that was going on. So now the towers come down, and I'll never forget listening to that radio, which turns out to be Police Officer Morris Smith from the 13th Precinct.
Who was killed that day?
Well, as time was going on with all the insanity on the radio, there was a tone that would be put out if a cop is calling for help. And you just heard this female voice calling for help. Still had energy behind it, still had air in the lungs, you can tell. And she's going, "Help, help." And obviously it's a police radio, so it's only a police officer or a uniformed member of the service, as we call it, armed member of the service, that would have access to these radios. Our dispatchers, we call a central, put the tone out, which means clear the air, and saying, "Female officer, what's your location?" And the next thing you would hear was, "Help," but the volume had dropped. "Female officer on the air calling for help. What is your location?" "Help." Volume drops a little more. Again, numerous times. Finally got to the point where she wasn't answering, and the chaos just took off again.
Yeah.
At that point, they had gotten us through into Manhattan.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. There were guys working in Brooklyn that couldn't get through the Battery Tunnel, and they walked.
Yeah, yes.
Through the Battery Tunnel. Now, if anybody's familiar with New York, if you're not, the Battery Tunnel's, what, about a mile and a half? 2 miles?
How long, man?
Oh, easily, yeah.
Easy, right? And it's in the tunnel. And these cops and firemen and EMT people who were trying to get to help walked because they couldn't get through. Everything was stopped, so they walked through the tunnel. That's how much dedication these first responders had that day. And it makes me sick to my stomach to see the way first responders are being treated today. It gets under my skin. When I think about those days and how guys responded and what they did, it's like, did we forget what this country went through 20 years ago?
Well, like you said, even guys on our own job, buy your shoes, thinking that you're gone. That was the eerie feeling. I grew up out in Queens and, a blue collar neighborhood. And a lot of us became, police officers and firefighters. Some of us went to the Port Authority Police. Some of us, went out to Long Island, NYPD, FDNY. My old partner at the time, back in '01, had left to go through the fire academy. So cell phone service was down.
Yeah.
You're not going to get on the radio to find out, where somebody is just because you need. It was an eerie feeling. I'm out there doing a security post, and I happen to run into my old partner, who's now with FD, and give each other a hug. So now I know Jimmy's okay. He knows I'm okay. And it was a very strange feeling. And then you started finding out this one's gone, that one's gone, this one didn't make it, this one's missing. And it was just something that you could never fathom going on in your life. All the missing person posters taped to telephone poles, put up on boards, volunteers coming in from all over the country. A few days into it, that feeling where we were finally appreciated, and this is what it took, unfortunately. People holding up signs, thank you NYPD, thank you FDNY, we love you. I stood on numerous foot posts doing security, and I'll never forget a guy walking by me, and he walks up and he shakes my hand, and he goes, I have to be honest with you, he goes, I've never been a fan of cops. He goes, but I have a newfound respect for you guys. He goes, you guys ran into that mess, and a lot of you guys didn't make it out.
Yeah.
God bless him,
Yeah, and the guy was man enough to appreciate what you did. It's funny, I talk about, I'm always a ball breaker when it comes to the new generation. Because obviously I'm old school. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I was raised by, my father was a World War II vet. My mother would have been 100 this year. Oh, she would have been 101 this year, I'm sorry. So I was raised with those old school values, like both of you were. I remember this, it sticks in my head. Somehow when we got out of danger, we walked all the way down to the end of Battery Park and worked our way up to the east side where the Brooklyn Bridge was. And I remember before we got to that point, we stopped at a sanitation depot. It was and the phones were working for some reason. And I call home to tell my ex-wife, go get my daughter out of school. It's like the thought of, I don't know what's going to happen next. Get her out of school, get her home, because who the hell knows if they're going to attack schools next. So I made that phone call. Now I'm covered from head to toe in, nobody took pictures. There was pictures, but we weren't taking selfies.
Yeah. There weren't even cell phones.
Yeah, there weren't even cell phones then. And I remember the sanitation guys took a hose and they hosed us down. They literally just hosed the three of us down and I had cuffs on the bottom of my pants and it was caked up steel dust inside my pant legs. I had that suit for years. I don't know why I ever threw it out. But I remember walking there, seeing kids playing basketball in a schoolyard while mayhem is literally a couple miles behind them. And I thought to myself, what are you doing?
Yeah.
We just got attacked and you're playing basketball like there's nothing going on? And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what? I guess to them it didn't affect their life. To this day, that boggles my mind. I'm just like, how can you just sit there and play basketball and not pay attention to what the hell's going on, or even try to go help somebody to see if they need somebody, some kind of help. It just boggled my mind. But it was a rough day for everybody. I guess that's how they handled it. So I wanted to talk to you about, we all know what happened that day, what happened with us up in New York, and how we responded and all. When you guys, were you on patrol when it was happening? Were you off duty? What were you doing?
I remember it distinctly. I was in communications, pulling some warrant information on a couple of my fugitives, just some updated information, make sure it was in the computer and entered right. And communications had a big screen TV, like the screen, they had a projector, so it was,
Right.
And we were in there, and they said a plane hit the World Trade Center. And like Brian, I thought, from seeing it, that it was a private plane, somebody screwed up. And then next thing you know, I'm watching and I see this other plane, and it was, as soon as the other plane hit, and all of us have had this feeling before when something really goes bad, you could feel the blood just leave your head and rush. I mean, it was frustration, confusion. What about my children? What about my wife? But because at the time, we knew that the United States was being attacked, but being a police officer or a law enforcement officer, my thought is that's not going to be the only attack.
No.
They're not just going to hit one area. And I just remember the other thing that was very upsetting to me is I grew up in Valley Stream, which was right on the border of Queens. We've been to the city over and over and over again, growing up. But what particularly upset me is that June, my wife and my two children were up on top of the World Trade Center.
Oh, the windows on the world.
Yeah, in June, because I took the kids, because they were born and raised there. I took them to Ellis Island. I wanted them to see the city, and we were up there just that June. And as growing up as a kid, even with you guys, the Twin Towers were always there. It was part of your life. It was there. But as far as from our perspective, law enforcement perspective, I was also assigned to SWAT, so everything was on we were on a higher alert, because we didn't know what was going to happen. We were told that we may, if we had to activate for any active threat, we would have to be available. But coming from New York, it had a different feeling to me, because it was home. My home was attacked. Also, the biggest frustration from a law enforcement point of view, and all cops felt it, is our brothers and sisters up in New York were dealing with this, and we couldn't be there to help them. It doesn't matter what agency you're with or what state you work for. Cops all feel it when somebody goes down, and it was very frustrating that we had a whole base here, but we couldn't all run up there to assist our brothers and sisters up there. And then the counts started coming out of this how many cops and firemen are missing, and people are missing, and it was just it was a lot to deal with. And the last part of it, which I think was very upsetting to being in Florida, is it later came out, especially Southwest Florida, that these mutts
in Venice
trained in Venice.
Yeah.
And you really almost have, even though you have nothing to do with it, but being from the state of Florida, you carry around a little bit of this guilt.
Yeah.
Not that you could have done anything, but why? How did this happen? How could this even happen? How could anything like this happen?
The guy didn't want to learn how to land; he just wanted to learn how to take off.
Exactly. And I mean, that should have been the first red flag. But
I mean, that's common sense.
But it was very disheartening. Anybody you spoke to, it looked like for the first couple of weeks, everybody had that Walking Dead look on their face. I mean, because it's something you're not going to get over.
And it's funny because you'll know this because you were there, but I never saw the city so patriotic ever in my life after that attack. Even though as messed up as it was, and how being down, I was at the morgue, I was at Ground Zero, I was at the landfill. But when you went through the city, like Brian mentioned before, people were up, with signs, thank you police, thank you firemen, thank you EMS. Now, they wanted to fund the police.
No, even here they were like that.
Yeah, so...
When you think about it, even at Ground Zero, that big banner in the South End, strip, we will never forget.
Yeah.
right?
Well, they forgot.
Everybody prayed. Oh, we'll never forget. Everybody promised.
Yeah.
And now, like you said, to defund the police. And all.
And this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this show as a debut show. And, you know, most of the other shows won't be this gloomy, I should say. But I just feel it's a responsibility as a first responder and somebody that was there and lost very good friends that day. On top of, I mean, I can't even count anymore how many friends of ours have died from cancer related to 9/11. I mean, thank God Jon Stewart really went to bat with Congress because they were going to take the funding away for our health program for the World Trade Center. We go for our exams once a year. My medication for my lung issues and all the other stuff I got going on is paid for by that program. So to think that Congress just wanted to wash their hands of what happened that day, they forgot.
And incredibly so, they forgot.
Yeah, and you know, a friend of mine, Louis Alvarez, that was on there, he was a former Marine as well. He was a couple of days away from death from the cancer.
Right.
And he testified to Congress that day. And Jon Stewart is the one that, you know, engineered that whole thing with Louis to get up to Congress and say, "What are you guys out of your mind?" But the reason I wanted to bring this subject up was because, like Brian said, never forget. Yeah, this country forgot. Well, you know, I don't know where this country is going or what the hell's going on, but we're in a lot of trouble here. There is no patriotism that's at least shown in the media, which is sickening to my stomach. And I travel throughout the country with the show, with my show, The Dead Files. And there's certain parts of the country that just, I'm like, I think I'm living in a different country. It's like, how can you not be patriotic? And it's just, I don't want to mention any specific areas because I don't want to get in trouble here, but people go, "Where are you from?" I go, "I'm from the United States." And I told you the story, right? Yeah. The guy asked me where I was from. I said, "I'm from the United States." And he goes, and he gave me that look, like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Bro, this ain't the fucking United States. I hate to upset you. I don't know what fucking planet this is, but this ain't the United States." And, you know, everything was anti-this, anti-cop, and it just made me sick. Not one American flag up on homes as I was driving through. I'm like, it really bothers me. And the patriotism that we saw then, even with the football games, remember the NFL, how everything was pro this, pro the big giant American flags across the field.
Nobody would dare take a knee.
Take a knee.
You know, like you were saying earlier, that our skyline, you know, I mean, I live right off the Long Island Expressway in Queens. Coming in, I miss seeing that, and I had this anger about me. Like, I went through a sad stage and then anger, like, you know, when it finally all set in, and that anger consumed me for a long time. But you know what kept me leveled was the patriotism.
Yeah.
It was, you know, everybody stepping up to the plate saying, "God bless America." We all came together as one.
Well,
no matter what your political affiliation, no matter what you thought, everybody appreciated, you know. Of course, nobody likes a dirty cop or anything like that. And the majority of cops are outstanding people. Now it's gone from that patriotism that we seen on 9/11 through, you know, 02. Let's say we had a really good year, basically, of everybody, you know, finally, you know, saying, "Wow, these guys really did the right thing." We, you know, to we're going to defund the police. We're gonna, you know, we want to shut down police departments, lawless states, you know, bail reform. You know, it's just where are we going as a society?
No place good, I can tell you that. I mean, it's funny you mentioned how everybody came together. I remember being down at Ground Zero and we were doing the 12-hour tours, 12 on, 12 off, no days off. And my first day off was in February 13th of 2002. 12-hour days every day from that day till, I remember it was the day before Valentine's Day. And I remember being down on, a lot of people volunteered to serve food to all the first responders down there. And who's there? The most anti-cop, liberal Hollywood, Susan Sarandon. serving food.
Yeah.
You know, and a couple of guys, because she led a lot of anti-police rallies in New York City at one time. She was famous for that. But she was down there serving food, and I said to her, I said, I appreciate you doing this. She says, well, I appreciate what you guys are doing. So, and then I walk two steps later, and there's Sigourney Weaver. You know, so we had all these celebrities getting involved. Even that Bruce Willis came to the station house where Maura Smith worked, because I was on the third floor in the homicide squad. I actually saw Maura that morning coming into work. We passed each other going into the locker rooms, and who the hell knew what was going to happen, right? But when Bruce Willis came to the station house, he came with the guy. You ever see the guy at the ball field that's got that big giant eagle that he sends out, he flies out and comes back? This was the guy with the eagle. So we're standing there, and he's giving a little speech about, you know, what's going on. All of a sudden, we hear out of the back room, we hear, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!" And it was one of the detectives I worked with. We used to call him Butterhead. And so Bruce Willis kind of brushed it off, and he starts talking again. He opens the door again. "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!" He must have said it 3 or 4 times, and Bruce Willis just broke out laughing. He says, "Get that son of a bitch out here!" So Butterhead comes out, and I tell you, everybody was laughing. And you know what? It was one of those moments where you needed that laugh.
Well, that was our defense to keep ourselves going. People don't realize that. We needed that humor of, you know, there's a lot of behind the scenes, so to say, in police department of, you know, us breaking each other's chops. And we need that to keep ourselves going in an everyday scenario. You know, from what we've seen that day, from what we've seen outside of 9/11, you know, it's our little humor, and we break each other's chops. And
well, what we find funny, other people are shocked by.
Exactly.
But like we said, it's kind of a defense mechanism. And you know, it's funny because my 2 buddies here, we all belong to this group. Well, it's our group. We call it Club Hurtful, and we meet on a certain day at a cigar bar, and we just drink, have cigars, and we break each other's balls till no end.
Mercifully.
Yeah, I mean, to the point of it's hurtful. If anybody ever watched it, and we might just do a show of us hanging out together, but if your skin is not 3 inches thick, you wouldn't last 5 minutes. And the reason we call it Club Hurtful is just to dig at the millennials and how, you know, they get triggered and they cry because somebody looked at them sideways, and they got to cry and they need a safe room. And, you know, I know everybody's going to be annoyed with me for saying that, but I really don't care, because we got a generation of there's no men anymore. The women aren't ladies. It's just disgusting what's going on in this world.
Well, if we go back to what we're saying with the crux of this, what's really upsetting us is it took people to watch on TV or be there in person to see everybody running out, and all these people that had wives, children, everything else, all these cops running in there knowing that they're not going to come, they're probably not going to come back out.
Not knowing what's going to happen.
Right? This is a person that takes a job that isn't really a great paying job. We took it all because it was in our heart to take the job, knowing that every time you go out, you may not see your family again. Your family knows every time you leave the house, you may not be coming back. You miss birthdays, you miss holidays, you miss weddings, you miss everything, all for the sake of taking care of other people.
Public service.
This is the only job in the world, the job we were on was the only job in the world where you could deliver a baby on the beginning of your shift and take a life at the end of your shift.
Yeah.
All right? It's the only job that for 20 years you go from slow to a dangerous situation. Slow, I mean, and that is why most cops, thank God none of us, we beat it. Most cops die within 5 years of retiring from the stress.
And a lot of them meet the gun. That's the other
And and the other thing is, and it's a macho thing, not everybody will admit it, but I'll tell everybody straight out, every single one of us has PTSD.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot go 20 years seeing death and dismemberment by a so-called civilized society. Now, don't get me wrong. The military, you have 2 years and it's rough, but you're doing it for 2 years and you're in that environment. You're in a so-called what you would call as a civilized society seeing man's atrocities
Every day for 20
every
years.
day. I was in homicide, you were in homicide, all the things we've all seen and everything else. But what's gotten me very upset is how the community has turned on the people that basically provide them the freedom to demonstrate, provide them the freedom to do what they're doing. And now all of a sudden we're villains. I retired as the number 2 in the sheriff's office, and I can tell you this, I can never do that job. Not the way it is today.
No, I couldn't
No
either.
way. It's thankless.
Well, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say it's a thankless job, and unfortunately, when I see guys that we both know saying, "Oh, my kid's going to go on the job," I'm like, Jesus, I don't know how I could recommend anybody being a police officer today.
No, I couldn't.
Well, especially in New York City. No identification.
Yeah,
It's become a lawless
Hey, listen,
city, you know?
not anybody sitting here is going to say the same thing to everybody out there. The same thing. Nobody likes a dirty cop more than other cops.
That's right.
Nobody hates
a dirty cop more than other cops. And when a cop does something stupid or does something that's illegal, it's a stain on everybody that's doing kicking their ass, working every day, trying to do the job.
But it's a shame that we get a black eye when somebody does something wrong. They label us, you know, and people don't want to admit, but they label us as if we are a religion or a creed or a race. If we're blue, we're just bad. You know, and don't get me wrong, you know, there's you can take a family that comes from disarray, and you know, a lot of times you're a product of your environment, and people strive and they survive and they make it. You know, and you could have one person in that family that did something, you know, catastrophically wrong. Does that mean that whole family is bad? No. And why don't people see it from, you know, I mean,
that's
so
a
I go out
great
one
way.
day and I do a great job and everything, and then 2 weeks later, somebody who works in a completely different borough, but you know, wears the same uniform as me, slipped through a crack, and now all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy, you're the bad guy, you're the bad guy. That's not right.
No, and the other thing is they label us all as racist. But let's call it like we're going to call it. Being in most of my career was in the African American neighborhoods. I helped a lot of people. I took care of a lot of people. A lot of people respected me.
Yeah.
You do have some bad apples. There's no question about it. And they have no business strapping on a badge. You're there to defend everybody. You're there to protect everybody. Doesn't matter what their sexual orientation is, their color, their economic background. Everybody's treated the same.
Absolutely.
But the bad apples is very few and far between. 99% of the cops I've been around, other law enforcement, they're all doing it for the right reason. Their heart's in it. That's why you take the job.
I don't know how anybody today could really have their heart in doing law enforcement when society does not have its back.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a thankless job when we were on the job. You know, first of all, it's depressing. It's going to take its toll on guys going to work every day and not having the support of society, you know, in general. Now, a lot of people out there are supportive of cops, but they're not heard because of the left side bad-mouthing the cops so much that they can't be heard.
Well, the media loves it.
Oh, the media
because
eats it
they're
up.
selling the stories, and you know. But unfortunately, there is another side. I feel that the majority of society are decent people, but you know what? We need to speak up.
Well, that's the problem. The voice of the people that do support law enforcement and our military is not being heard. All you're hearing is about how 1 out of 500,000 cops did something bad, and now they all suck.
Right.
They're all no good, and it's not right. I mean, does everybody say doctors are bad when you get the one doctor that does bad surgeries or, you know, prescribes pills to somebody that they shouldn't be? You see anybody defunding the doctors, or you see anybody going after them? You know, so for me, every branch of
Every career.
out there has their bad guys.
Everybody.
You know, so
I mean, think about it. There's been epidemics of doctors writing prescriptions.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that doesn't mean. I'm not going into my doctor's office next week for a checkup and going, oh, this guy's terrible. He's a drug dealer.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, that was that one person. You know, one specific person.
But I don't think any of us here could turn around and say that they agreed what they saw with the George Floyd thing. That was horrible.
Yeah.
It should have never happened. That's a person who should never have even been issued a badge. All right. There are some other incidents when somebody unarmed was killed, and But then again, I also see that there are some incidents that are pushed where the whole story isn't being told because it matches an agenda.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, as far as I'm concerned, with the current state of law enforcement. I mean, right now, there are people that, let's say, are killed by law enforcement, whether it's a good shooter, a bad shooter, whatever it is. But it's top story, no matter what. How many cops have been killed this year so far?
Wow.
And it is not a top story. But now we're so immune to it, we're so hardened to it, that people don't have a heart when it comes to law enforcement. Oh, just another cop got shot. Well, it's his job.
Yeah.
That's the attitude.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing.
And you know what? And it's frustrating for somebody like me because I am so-called in the business in Hollywood, even though I don't consider myself. I consider myself a retired detective that happens to be on TV. Some people say I'm a celebrity. I don't buy that bullshit because I don't feel that way. You guys know me. Do I act like a celebrity?
No, regular guy.
Yeah.
Your mouth.
So, but I'm surrounded by that industry that is just, you can't say anything around them because, the police are bad, this, that, and the other thing. And it frustrates me because in my profession now, I am the minority. I'm pro 2A, I'm pro police, I'm pro military, which, I mean, when people look at me and go, well, I don't understand, how can you be pro 2A or pro cop and pro this? And I'm like, well, let's see. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. My father was a World War II vet, landed on Omaha Beach in D-Day. Both my brothers were in Vietnam. Let's see. Oh, wait. I served in the Marines, was in Beirut in combat conditions, went on the police department for 22 years, and you can't figure out that I'm not patriotic or that I lean towards law and order. I mean, fucking Ray Charles can see that. I mean,
a lot of people live in a bubble and they just want to
well,
run with.
I'm just
hey, this is
amazed.
trendy.
Like somebody, like on the social media, when I praise Governor DeSantis, who I love dearly. I think we have one of the best governors ever.
We have the
best governor. And they equate that with me being a Trumper. And if you're a Trumper, you're a racist. I'm like, it boggles my mind because I'm like, what in the fuck are you talking about? I support my governor because his
policies are great.
Policies are fantastic. And everything he does is for our citizens of Florida. So it boggles my mind the way people just jump to conclusions about somebody without knowing. And it is frustrating, especially for me dealing with being in the public's, image, for lack of a better word. But I try to keep my politics to myself. I don't go saying this, I don't go saying that. When it comes out to, I'll post pictures of, like my fiance bought me a Kimber 1911-45 for our engagement gift. I posted it on social media. The majority of people that looked at it was like, wow, that's great, this and then you'll get guns are terrible, you shouldn't be advocating for 2A and all this. I'm like, I can't even have this argument because it's as if, if I try to argue with somebody that don't want to hear your side of anything.
Well, you're chasing your tail.
You're chasing your tail.
They don't want to hear it. It's amazing. If you don't want a gun, fine, don't get it.
Well,
I know how to handle myself with a gun and everything. I want a gun, but I'm not going to tell you if you want to own a merry-go-round, you can't own a merry-go-round because I find merry-go-rounds, oppressive and dangerous. Because merry-go-rounds have killed people. There's been malfunctions, right?
That's right.
But unfortunately, we're living in a society now. I'll tell you, my personal rules as of late with what goes on now, I don't talk about religion, politics, or abortion.
Yeah.
It's going to always end up in an argument.
Yeah.
Nobody can have an opinion.
Well, this is the problem with society today. Years ago, you could agree to disagree.
Yes, without a doubt.
And still be
Cordial.
cordial about it. Today, I don't know what's going on out there. People cannot have an opinion without being hated by somebody that doesn't feel the same way. So it's become, the society today has become so diverse as far as, well, I shouldn't say diverse, split over, if you don't believe what I believe, then I hate you.
Right.
And if you don't believe what I believe, I hate you too. Whatever happened to, like, listen, you believe what you want to believe,
That's
I'll
right.
believe what I want to believe. Just don't force your bullshit on me, and I won't force my bullshit on you.
But in that respect, that is on both sides.
Yeah.
They're both sides. I mean, I have people who think exactly like me, and they don't want to talk to to Joe and Mary because Joe and Mary think differently, and rather than just waving hello and keeping it cordial.
It's crazy. I've seen people say, "Oh, I got unfriended by somebody because I thought because I was a Trump supporter." I'm like, if they're gonna unfriend you just because of who you support politically, that's not really a friend.
No.
And this was somebody, she said, we were friends for like 25 years. I said, so 25 years ago when you argued about politics, it was fine. But today, for some reason, it's so strong of a feeling with people. It's like...
But a lot of that has to do with false agendas and brainwashing.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt,
Basically
100%.
brainwashing. Like right now, I wear this thin blue line bracelet wherever I go. I'm not embarrassed for anybody to know I was a cop.
Me either. I've got my police department logo on my
It's all over everything.
Yeah.
I got it tattooed on me and everything else. All right, but somebody's pushed this narrative that the thin blue line is basically the cops, all taking care of each other. We have this thin blue line club, and we cover for each other. That's not what the thin blue line is. The thin blue line is us, again, between us, them, and us, and holding the line between evil and good.
Yes.
That's the thin blue line. It's not some club, some organization where we're all covering for each other and everything else.
Well, that agenda wouldn't sell, though. So if they push it...
But it's a true agenda.
Yeah. No, I know that. But, again, bad news always sells, and they want to make us the villains. And unfortunately, I fly a thin blue line flag in front of my house.
So do I.
And I love it. And somebody actually said to me, somebody saw it, I posted it on my Facebook page. You fly that, on your front lawn? I said, yeah, American flag, the thin blue line flag. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what I've done. And I support that system. But I couldn't believe, because the same thing. Well, some people will take that as, a racist thing. Like you're against certain people. I go, I'm not against anybody.
How is that right?
It's just a mindset of insanity. Because I can tell you this, and I'm sure we all agree on this. I am not against any race, religion, creed, gender. You know what I'm against? The evil individual.
Yeah.
And if that individual happens to be and thank God we're off the job, of a different race, now all of a sudden because I'm a white police officer, I'm the racist. Yeah. And that's the shame of it. And the bad news keeps selling. Cops, being, brought to justice only to find out they did the right thing. Is that right to do to them?
Well,
absolutely not.
That's the whole point of why I wanted to do this show, the first show, especially with the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up. It's because I remember distinctively how it was and how pro-country and pro-cop and pro-fireman, all this pro-first responder stuff 20 years ago was unbelievable to actually see, even though it was from a disaster. And when you got a representative in Congress or in the House saying, "Oh, there was no attacks on 9/11; it was made up," that's when I lose my shit, and I want to go nuts. But it's just we've gone so far the other way where it seems like nobody loves this country anymore, and it really bothers me. It really bothers me to think there's no patriotism out there.
Well, but I think there's a lot of patriotism, but it's being suppressed.
Well, absolutely.
It's the narrative that's not being told. They want people to think. I think it's actually not a big minority, majority. The thing that also, when it comes to the way the media and everything else is portraying the African American community, I think some of what they're doing is an insult to the African American community. I believe that there is a big part of the African American community that does not want law enforcement disbanded.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, there are things that could be tweaked, and I think that it is that we are going in a...
They suffer the most from defunding the police.
They do, and I think that there are some improvements and some interpersonal communication and other things that could be done to maybe help out with the community policing and stuff like that. But by and large, I think that the African American community or the Latino community, I think that they appreciate law enforcement. I think it's just the small minority out of that group that are pushing this, and some other people because it fits their agenda.
Well, it's the media that's the agenda. That's the let's call it what it is. It's the media's agenda and what they want to fuel. I mean, it's like the grand jury. A prosecutor can take the grand jury wherever it wants to get to either indict or not indict on a case. The media can control how they want things seen in this country, and it's funny because it's like, you watch the news, but then you talk to people and nobody agrees with some of the stuff that's going on, and you're like, well, how is it that the society's like all this cancel bullshit? Pepe Le Pew? I mean, give me a fucking break. It's
50, 60-year-old cartoon.
Yeah, I mean, give me a break already. I mean, enough is enough.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But when we were working, if we were working with some other guy and the guy turned around and said to us, hey, look, there's a black or Hispanic guy there, I'm going to just go find something to arrest him with and plant something on him. You wouldn't grab that guy?
Oh, yeah.
No, I would never have. I would never let it happen.
Yeah.
But this is the way we've been portrayed.
I got to say, thank God, knock on wood, I've always worked with great guys and women.
So did I.
I mean, there were guys in precinct I worked in, was a guy I knew who was doing robberies. He's robbing crack fucking houses while he was off duty, and he wound up being a crackhead. Was he one of the bad seeds?
Yes, absolutely.
But you know what? You can't blame 250 guys in that precinct. One of them was a shithead. You're going to blame 249 people?
No, you're not, and that's the problem. But the biggest fear I see and the biggest threat to law enforcement today is these young kids that are on the job now because of all the bad media and everything else. When you're involved in a critical situation, you have a split second to identify the threat, draw your weapon, and as you're drawing your weapon, make sure there's nothing behind him that could be caught in a crossfire. These poor kids today, and this is not only protecting yourself, it's protecting other people. They have to stop, think, well, if I pull my gun, am I going to be in trouble? Is this going to work against me? And once he's pulling his gun, if I shoot this person, even though they're armed, is it going to work again? More cops are going to get killed.
Well, hesitation kills. That's the problem.
Look at this poor cop that did the right thing. Of that girl, I don't know if it was in the Carolinas or Georgia. I can't remember where it was. The perpetrator was going at her with a knife.
Yeah.
She was going to kill the girl. The officer discharged his firearm to save that girl's life, and the way that he was portrayed in the media,
it was vilified.
It was vilified.
Yeah.
But now, if he sat there and didn't shoot, and this girl hacked up her in front of the cop, then he would have been a villain anyway.
Yeah,
He's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
It was a lose-lose situation. But, I mean, it's just the way it is now, and it's unfortunate. I think more cops are going to lose their
Somebody
lives.
needs to open the book and shake it and go, look, everybody.
Yeah.
This is how it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Enough of the safe rooms, enough of I need a crying space and all this bullshit. So, it's a pretty gloomy subject we've been talking about. And, but the name of the show is Not For Nothing with Steve DiSchiavi, right? So, Not For Nothing comes out of my mouth probably, 20 times a day.
Sure, easily.
But everybody, like the crew on my show, they're like, well, what does that mean? What do you mean, not for nothing? What is
It is what it is.
It is what it is, not for nothing. Not for nothing usually is going to follow with an insult most of the time.
Well, it can also...
Not for nothing, but you're getting fat, fucko. Stuff like
But
that.
it's also listen up.
Yeah.
Hey, not for nothing. Your phone's ringing.
Not for nothing. that pizza was pretty good.
Yeah. But it's almost like with the Italians, forget about it. It could have 7
Oh,
different
yeah,
meanings.
forget about it. Has a million different.
It has a million different meanings, so it's the same thing. But not for I think it's a great. That is you. That's all. Not for nothing.
Yeah, not for nothing, but you might want to cut down on the
Usually when you
chips,
say not-
shit like that. Not you.
Oh, yeah, no, I am.
Usually when you say not for
I'm
nothing,
the last one to talk.
when you say not for nothing, for me, in a sentence, when you talk to me, I know it's either
Oh,
something
no.
hurtful or maybe something you enjoyed, but it's usually on the hurtful end.
Yeah.
But
Well, you gotta. For me, 9 out of 10 times, it's definitely gonna be an insult at the end. So, gentlemen, I don't know how to thank you. You two, we're friends, but you're brothers to me, and not just because we were all cops. I really believe that we have a special bond. All of us do. I think everybody in our crew has a very special bond with each other, and we really. And that's why I wanted you guys to be on my first show, because it's something that once everybody hopefully starts looking at this show and tuning in, I mean, it's not always going to be this gloomy stuff.
Normally it'd be.
No, but we're going to get some funny topics coming up.
But you're going to be talking about topics that matter.
Yes, topics that matter. Some of the stuff that's out there, and Max that produces the show came up with some stuff he sent me, and I'm like, this can't be true. And you know what? It was. And I was like, this is definitely got to be spoken about, because there's some crazy shit going on out there in this world. And it has nothing to do with really politics. It's just weird stuff that's happening out there. I know fans are going to be asking me about when you're going to talk about paranormal stuff. Obviously, on the show, I'm not the paranormal person. So for me to talk about the paranormal is, it's not my wheelhouse. But I will have some guests on, hopefully, that are in that field that I have respect for, and just get their take on what, there's a lot of closet paranormal people out there. You always get the people, I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in any of that crap. And these are the jerk-offs sitting at home 2 o'clock in the morning watching a horror movie or watching some kind of a show. But anyway, I want to thank you guys again. I appreciate you coming on. I was proud.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And who's buying lunch?
You are.
Not for nothing, you are.
Not for nothing.
Not for nothing, but I'm buying lunch. Anyway, that was pretty hurtful, that last thing about lunch. But I want to thank everybody for listening in and watching. If you do catch us on one of the venues that have the video, we'll have some more shows coming up, and I will keep everybody apprised of things through social media. And from us to you, have a great day.
Good night.
Good night.